Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement podcast with Dr. Thomas Hemingway. Have you ever looked in the mirror and said to yourself, I thought I'd be healthier, in better shape, feel better both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and be further along in my life? If so, come on this journey with my dad as he explores all things health and wellness from a holistic medical perspective, even as a classically trained physician. He'll share integrative strategies to optimize health and inspire you to join the modern medicine movement.
Welcome. Big aloha to everybody. Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement podcast. I'm Thomas Hemingway here. Super excited to be here. Super grateful. Quick shout out, to my son Isaac. Oh gosh, I love that intro. Thanks to my wife who's been so supportive. This has been a long time dream and just really grateful to have this opportunity to share with you. Today's topic is one that, as a physician, honestly, I just couldn't not talk about this. This has been affecting our everyday life around the world, no matter where we live, what country we're in. I just couldn't not talk about it. And beyond that, I'm a frontline doc. I'm an ER doc. I'm right in the mix of these type of things. It's part and parcel to what I do. I just couldn't not share about it. So, just wanted to be able to talk a little bit about that with you, as well as some tools that we can use to optimize our health and specifically optimize our immune health to be able to combat illnesses such as this, this virus that's going around worldwide and any kind of illness, viral, bacterial, or otherwise, how we can arm ourselves and improve our immune system to really be able to combat these things in our lives. Now, first off, I got to get this out of the way. Quick disclaimer. Yes, I am a physician, but I'm not your physician. And what I'm saying here in this podcast is really my take on things, my opinion. Yes, it's based on experience. Yes, it's based on lots of education, learning, synthesizing, but it is not and does not constitute medical advice for you. These are my thoughts. These are my experience, but this is, at the end of the day, it's my opinion. So this is not medical advice. So just wanted to get started and really at the outset of this, and I hope that the overlying message and theme and what you'll take away after listening to this is that I love to give hope, to really portray that belief in yourself, belief in humanity. We're going to get through this. And yes, it's a crisis. Yes, it's a global health crisis. And yes, it's important. And I, as a physician, can't not respect that and can't not pay attention. And I think you should pay attention too, but I don't think that this should, cause us panic or fear or, ruin our lives or whatever, because I think at the end of the day, we really can and will get through this, both as a country, as a world. We're going to get through this. We're going to learn a lot of lessons. And I just want you to be hopeful. I want you to be optimistic. There's no better time, no better place than now, really, to share that hope and optimism with the public. So I want to start out with that. And, I'm going to give a few stats, at the beginning, which are relevant as of today, March 23rd. They'll be changing every day. I check the CDC website with the numbers and the latest data and things that are coming out. And one of the things that I liked is a great reminder, and I'll just quote it. From the website. It says, while the outbreak, of course, we're talking about the coronavirus here, is a serious public health concern, most people who contract the coronavirus do not become seriously ill, and only a small percentage require intensive care. Older people and those with existing health conditions like heart or lung disease are at higher risk. And so at the end of the day, I want us to be hopeful. I want us to be optimistic. And, I can't help it. I'm an optimist. I love seeing the positive in things. I'm not a guy that likes to get down on this and on that. And that's why I try to not watch too much of the news. I watch the pertinent stuff, but I don't try to put that as top of the list of everyday stuff, because most of the time it's depressing. Who wants to be depressed? I want to, be happy and exude joy And so that's what I'm going to try to do amidst, the concerns. I have great concerns about this thing. I mean, just like it is you, it's affecting me. It's affecting my family. While we speak here, I'm doing what you guys are doing. I'm at home doing our own, version of quarantine. We're here at home and we're trying to avoid, places and things so that we don't become ill, just like you should be as well. The prudence that's there for us, to be prudent with respect to social distancing and good hygiene, that's part and parcel of this. That's probably the most important thing right now if we want to avoid this illness, as to take that seriously, take the social distancing and personal hygiene to the next level. One thing that my grandmother always told me, most likely yours did too, it's a saying that's been around forever. The old dictum that an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. Well, this is more pertinent now than it's ever been before. I mean, most of us, probably all of us, I would suspect, including me, we don't want to get the coronavirus. We don't want to get it. We don't want our family members to get it. And so there's some real basic stuff we can do, to improve our odds of not getting it, right? And most of it is this hand hygiene, good personal hygiene, and, really utilizing, the measures that have been asked of us to practice the social distancing. And that's for a reason, right? I mean, the coronavirus is a contagious virus, very contagious, and it's spread very easily. So, we want to try to avoid it. And so not being in people and groups, that's why all of the big events have been canceled, concerts, big conferences, all that, of course, has been canceled. And it makes sense, right? I mean, even the limited exposure and things that we can avoid, like, for example, I'm the father of 6 kids, man. We got a family of 8, and we got to go to the grocery store every now and then. I mean, we're good probably for a couple of weeks. We've done some shopping over the last couple of weeks in preparation, a little bit at a time. And so we're pretty good for a little while, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to, go back and get a few things. I mean, we got 6 kids, for crying out loud. We got to go to the grocery store. So, when you have to be out and about, do the simple stuff, wash your hands, don't touch your face. If you're using a shopping cart, wipe it down first. I think every place provides the antiseptic wipes there at the front, wipe them down first, because, this virus, like really any others, is easily transmissible. It can last on inanimate objects like the grocery cart, a doorknob, things like that. That's called a fomite for those that know about that. It's just a non-living thing that you can have germs on, basically. Anything that we touch, a desk, a cell phone, whatever, that's a fomite. And these bacteria can be there like others, and viruses, specifically the coronavirus, can be on a shopping cart, and it may last there for a couple of days. So let's be prudent. Let's wipe down the things we have to touch and try not to touch our faces. And if we are coughing, honestly, we should be at home. We shouldn't be coughing and spreading this stuff. So that's just simple hygiene stuff. That's just, simple things we should all be practicing. Absolutely, 100%. And then, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I shared that with you on my first podcast. I'm kind of a surfer nerd, a geek when it comes to learning and all of that. And I put my head in the books, and I just can't help myself. So I got to share with you a little bit, about the virus and so on. And just as I promised, as of today, the 23rd of March, I want to give you a couple of updates and some optimism associated with that. I mean, honestly, we got in the world, though this is a severe, significant, and really a global crisis. I mean, so far as of today, approximately 15,000 people worldwide have died from this, the coronavirus. And I wish that number was 0. I think all of us would wish that. But it's not, ridiculous at this point, and I hope it never gets really high. I mean, just to put things in perspective, here in the U.S. alone, that was a worldwide number of approximately 15,000 deaths so far. In this year alone, from our very own influenza virus, which we see every season, we've had, approximately 20,000 or so U.S. deaths from the flu this year. Now, I'm not comparing the flu and coronavirus here. They're totally different viruses. This coronavirus is a bad virus. The flu is a bad virus. I'm not saying one is worse, one is not bad. They're all bad. But just to give you perspective, we've had over 20,000 people in the U.S. alone just this flu season die from influenza, die from the flu. So I hope we never get to that here in the U.S. I think so far as of this morning, there were 428 deaths in the U.S., which, the way I like to spin that, I like to always have a positive spin on things, right? So if you did that math, you'd get about a 1.3% death rate here in the U.S., because we've had 33,000 something cases. So you got a 98.7% chance of surviving in the U.S. if you get the coronavirus. Those are pretty good odds. Once again, I don't want you guys to get it. I don't want you to get ill. And so please, please, please practice the measures that we've learned about, the social distancing, good hygiene practices like we just mentioned. Please practice those things. We don't want this to become a bigger issue. And in fact, if we all took that seriously and strictly, and let's say we all just stayed home for 2 weeks, we all had enough food, water, all the things we needed, and the whole U.S. were to stay home for 2 weeks, this virus would be almost gone as far as, the spreading of it, would dip dramatically in a couple of weeks. That could benefit immensely. And so even though I'm not somebody who, really wants, the government to tell me, everything I need to do, I think we need to use common sense. And common sense states that we should take these things seriously. We should, do our best to practice the social distancing and good hygiene, because that's the best way to limit this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a severe worldwide problem. This is a bad virus. It's what we call virulent. Virulent is basically synonymous with a bad or strong, highly infectious virus, if you will. Okay. Just wanted to, just because of the nerd in me, I can't help but talk a little bit about viruses here. It's just, it's kind of fun. I'm a scientist at heart, and it's a little nerdy. So hopefully I don't bore you too much, but I think it's interesting and it'll be pertinent. And just a couple of terms just to, start out with. When we talk about COVID, 19, the 19, of course, is from 2019. This is the illness. COVID-19 is the coronavirus 19 illness that is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 strain of the virus. Now, we had a couple of years ago SARS-CoV-1, which we probably remember was this severe acute respiratory syndrome, which we were seeing a couple of years back, and that was super virulent. We also had MERS, which was another type of coronavirus a couple of years ago. That was very virulent, and those were probably even more virulent than our current SARS-CoV-2, which is causing the COVID-19, which is what we hear about in the news. So that's the actual illness. The virus itself, if we want to get technical and nerdy, it's the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And it is in the family, yes, it is, of coronaviruses. And it's the same family of viruses that causes the common cold that many millions and millions and millions get worldwide. It is not the same one that causes the common cold, but it is in that same family of viruses called the coronaviruses. And it's a novel virus. People are throwing that term around. What the heck is novel? Well, it's new for this season, right? It's been a mutated virus that's not only more infectious than the typical cold virus, super infectious, but it's more virulent, or it's a stronger, more nasty form of the cold virus. And yes, it is causing death. So yes, we need to take it seriously. So why do they call it a coronavirus? Anybody know? Well, it's basically a descriptive term for what the virus looks like under the electron microscope. Now, viruses are super teeny tiny. You can't just throw them onto one of these microscopes you get at the hobby store. You won't see it. They're too small. So with an electron microscope, if you look at the virus, corona means crown in Spanish. And it's just got sort of this halo looking thing on the outside of the virus. It's just the way that the membrane with the proteins has an appearance. When we look at it through the electron microscope, it looks kind of like a crown. Crown, corona, halo. That's why we call it the coronavirus. So it's a simple anatomy thing. It's what it looks like. So don't get too wrapped up in all that. But it's a virus like many others, which is that it can't live and reproduce without a host. It can't do this on its own. A virus needs a host. It actually, in and of itself and by itself, cannot replicate. It just can't do it. It needs a host cell because it actually borrows the host cell's proteins to produce, replication or to remake itself, to populate and multiply. It actually needs a human cell or an animal cell or what have you, plant cell. There are viruses that affect plants, but it can't do it on its own. The virus particle itself, the coronavirus, if you see it alone by itself in no host, it can't hurt anything. But once it gets into the host, oh man, it's going to be wreaking havoc. And this virus is a respiratory virus. It tends to act on mostly, respiratory cells of the lung and so on. And that's why respiratory symptoms are really, really, really super common in all of this because of that feature. It tends to bind to a certain receptor that's found on cells in the alveoli, in the lungs, and then it wreaks its havoc there. So once it does that, it jumps in, and then, like I said, it uses the host proteins to remake its RNA. It's an RNA virus, and then first thing it does is it uses the host, enzymes to be able to produce its own RNA. Then it's used that to make proteins to be able to replicate itself, and this whole process, it destroys the human host cell. So it's a very damaging virus. Super interesting virus, as well. And I may get into that later if we have time, but the actual receptor that it binds to is well known out there in medicine because of a medication that a lot of people take for hypertension, for high blood pressure. So I don't want to get too into that. That's a little bit too nerdy. But sort of the basics of this RNA virus is that it causes, very, very common cold type symptoms. Fever is found in the data so far that we have in almost 88% of the people that get infected with this virus. So fever was 87.9% reported, dry cough 67%, fatigue 38%. So not super helpful, right? Like anytime you get sick in the wintertime and you have a flu-like illness or you get fevers, body aches, a cough, these are all symptoms of this novel coronavirus. I think the thing that separates it a little bit is that the fever and dry cough are super, super common. Things like a runny nose, which is often found in the common cold and other, sort of seasonal viral illnesses that we get, have a lot of runny nose and nose or nasal symptoms. The coronavirus, interestingly, doesn't have a lot of that. It's more focused on fever and this dry cough. And so if you do have those symptoms, yes, it's possible that you could be infected. But if you're otherwise healthy and you're doing okay, you're not having any difficulty breathing, you're able to get some liquids down and you're staying hydrated, my first recommendation for myself, my family, anybody out there is that we stay home, that we actually don't go out and get tested for the coronavirus. Because if we're getting out and about, we're potentially going to infect other people, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So if you may even have coronavirus if you have these symptoms, but if you're not, having difficulty breathing and you're, doing okay at home, you should honestly really just stay at home. I know you might have the curiosity and interest, like, hey, I want to get tested. But you know what? The reality is, even if you were to go to your local ER, 9 times out of 10, even if they did provide the test, which most of them are not providing to people who aren't really, really ill, is that if they did the test right now, most hospitals, it takes several days to turn that into a result. So you're not getting same-day results in most places. You go there and you have the potential to infect more people, including the healthcare workers, the doctors, nurses, techs, and everybody else, as well as the other patients who may be there for other reasons. They're having a heart attack, a stroke, an injury or whatever. You may be infecting them. So you don't want to do that. So please, 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 if at all possible, stay at home. And, once again, because of that too, our numbers may be even more skewed because the people we're actually testing tend to be the sicker ones. So when I mentioned that global, 4 or 5% death rate globally and less than 2% in the US, it's probably even a lower number because most of the people aren't going to be able to get tested and don't even make up part of the numerator on that. So that's a good thing because, like I said, I'm trying to provide hope here. The chances are most people that will get this won't die from it, will recover, which is awesome. We will mostly all recover. And, hopefully we just don't get it in the first place. So anyway, there are groups of people, as you've heard about, that are much more susceptible. And primarily, these are the elderly. Anybody over 65, 70, certainly 80 years of age, and anybody who has chronic medical comorbidities or illnesses, that they have on a daily basis. People that have heart disease, people that have diabetes, high blood pressure, respiratory conditions. Absolutely, you're trying to avoid the virus at all costs. This is why they've basically shut down all the care homes for the elderly to not be having, a lot of individuals coming in and out of there and things like that, which it makes tons of sense. It breaks my heart a little bit because these elderly folks, are going to be around or wanting to be around their family. But it's probably not a good idea to be having visitors. And so hopefully they can use technology, things like, FaceTime and whatnot, to be able to see their loved ones and all of that, because they're a super, super, super susceptible population. When the numbers have been coming out of Italy, they've had one of the higher, if not the highest death rates in the world. Well, what they're seeing is that, the overwhelming majority of these patients are quite old, 70s, 80s, a lot of them, well into their 80s. So it's no surprise that there's unfortunately more that are succumbing to this illness, but it's definitely of much, much, much higher risk to the elderly population and, those which have comorbidities or other health conditions. And these other, health conditions are common, unfortunately, right? Like diabetes, very common, hypertension, obesity, coronary artery disease or heart disease. These are all, unfortunately, pretty common conditions. And especially when these conditions, in addition, like I mentioned earlier, to respiratory conditions, when these conditions are present, especially in our elders in our generation over 65, 70, there's going to be a much higher risk that they're going to have, more serious or critical illness. And so that's why the emphasis is really, really out there to not spread this around, because, if we had all of our elderly folks and lots of people, getting this illness, we could overwhelm our hospitals. There's lots of concerns out there about not having enough, ventilators, which is the machine that breathes for you if you're not able to breathe for yourself. And that's a big concern. I have that concern. Personally, I work at a small hospital on a small island primarily, which is, I think in the whole island, we have less than 20 ventilators. We have really only 2 hospitals, 1 main hospital. And, we have between the 2 hospitals, we have probably a dozen or less, ICU beds and, a couple extra ventilators for the ER patients and things like that. But I think we got less than 20 ventilators on our whole island, which is super small amount. So once again, please don't be traveling. Please honor the recommendations we've been given to do the social distancing, because we don't want this thing to become a bigger problem than it needs to be, because we really have within us the power to affect the outcome here. I really believe that in so many ways. And this is one of them, because we could overwhelm the system. And I think that's really the biggest concern out there right now with healthcare really is this possibility that we get overwhelmed in our system with the need for, ICU level care, for example, where they may need to be on a ventilator and things like that. And because of how virulent and how infectious and transmissible coronavirus is, this could really cause that. And so when people say we need to do the social distancing, we need to flatten the curve, well, what that means is to shift it from this kind of peak-like mountain-looking appearance where we have this, abrupt, asymptotic, which is a really, steep slope, if you will, of people getting ill and a lot of them getting ill quickly. We could easily overwhelm the system. But if this is more of a flat curve, it's not going to go up as quickly with the same rate, and you'll have less people requiring this ICU level type care, and you won't overwhelm the system, which is our hope. We don't want our system to be overwhelmed. But this virus in particular certainly has that potential. And that's where it's really scary. And that's where it's really different from the flu virus, which, even though unfortunately every year in the US, we have between 25 and 35,000 people dying just from the flu virus, because it's such a long lasting season. And the way that the spike is, it's not just one spike. It's kind of more of a gradual process where on an annual basis, typically not overcoming our healthcare system with patients from the flu for those reasons, as well as, it may not be quite as virulent and dangerous and serious as the coronavirus. So please, 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 once again, let's practice our social distancing. Let's be prudent, because that's a real potential problem out there. The lack of, tertiary care centers, high-level hospitals with, ICU care and respirators. That's a big, big concern. So I'm realistic, but I'm also optimistic. I think we as humans, we can do this. We have this in our ability to overcome this. And these folks, like I mentioned earlier, that have comorbidities, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, a phenomenon that occurs with almost all these chronic illnesses and conditions is something called insulin resistance, and especially with diabetes, but even with these other chronic inflammatory conditions, this insulin resistance that is present really alters the immune system, and it really takes its toll and makes the immune system not work like it should. Sort of in simple terms, it basically makes your immune cells, one of the ones most one of the ones most commonly affected by this is the T cell. That's one that goes out and kills the bad guys, right? Well, the T cell function gets slower, it gets more sluggish. Things that it's supposed to do, eat up the bad cells, that's called phagocytosis, things like the messaging, the chemotaxis and things, all that slows down. They just don't work and operate under ideal conditions because of this insulin resistance problem. And the chronic inflammation really does indeed affect your immune system so it doesn't perform well. That's a big issue. There's lots of folks in our country who have insulin resistance, which there's this, this triad of problems. We hear about it all the time. Those that have, obesity, hypertension, and elevated blood sugar, you throw in there, elevated cholesterol as well, and it becomes basically this thing we like to call the metabolic syndrome, or syndrome X, they used to call it when I was in medical school. But basically that, or some part of it, affects the majority of Americans. The data suggests that up to 88% of Americans have one or more of these problems. Once again, obesity, high blood pressure, elevated blood sugar or blood sugar problems, and elevated cholesterol. Up to 88% of us have one or more of those problems. Holy crap, that's a big, big deal. But the good news is that the overwhelming majority of us can do something about it. And that's where I come in. I want you to be empowered. I want you to be able to actually make a difference in your life and the life of others by being able to target the things that we do have control over. And this is one of those things, and it comes through a variety of ways, right? Through our overall health, our activity level, our nutrition. It's something that we can definitely affect and positively affect. Hopefully we're not negatively affecting that, because it's easy, right? I mean, especially now that we're basically all in home quarantine, we can just become couch potatoes and do nothing but Netflix all day and eat Cheetos and all those processed foods. And I hate to digress, but man, it just cracks me up. I was in the grocery store a couple of days ago, and I was so excited to see the fresh fruits, vegetables, produce section was nearly completely full. I was ecstatic because that packs up 90+% of our refrigerator. We hardly have anything processed in the house because we love, 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 love fresh foods, and they're good for us. Now, on the other hand, I went down the aisle where they sell, the pasta and the beans and canned goods, and that thing was decimated. There was almost nothing left on that aisle. It was crazy. And unfortunately, that's part of our problem here in the U.S. is we don't have the best diet. We don't eat as well as we should. And so please, 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 let's improve that. And the good news is we can positively affect that. If we eat clean, a diet high in fresh produce, clean, hopefully organic produce that's not chock full of all these just ridiculously harmful pesticides out there, the glyphosate and all that stuff. Let's eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, and it's going to help us so much, because as I mentioned, there is a connection between our health, our nutrition, and immunity. And I just talked about it kind of broadly with respect to this thing called insulin resistance, which is basically caused in large part by being overweight, having a poor diet, eating too many processed foods. That causes the insulin resistance problem that makes our immune function, specifically these T cells, not work well. And we can affect that, which is awesome. So we'll talk a little bit more about specific dietary things in just a second, because I'm just like totally into that. I'm a super nerd when it comes to how we can improve our nutrition and so on and so forth. There are other couple of simple things we can do to boost and improve our immune system, and I don't want to be remiss and forget about those. And one of those is exercise, right? Exercise is good for us, not only because it improves our profile and decreases insulin resistance, because we can, be healthier, we can lose weight, we can, be active. That's super helpful, because it decreases the likelihood that we would get, this syndrome X or this metabolic syndrome, but it also helps us to feel good. And so regular exercise, 3 to 5 days or even 6 days a week, if you like, is awesome. I'm not a proponent of a 7-day week, no break plan, because it's good for your body to take a break once in a while. So 3 to 5 days a week is awesome. If you can do something that will get you, your heart rate up and so on. And right now that we're home, we got to be a little creative. I'll be honest. I'm doing what I can around the house and just outside in my backyard, and walking, hiking around the house and just trying to get my exercise. I got a little weight bench in the garage and some things that I can do there. And my wife, oh my gosh, she is like the exercise fanatic. She cracked me up last week. She was in the garage, and let me just tell you right now where we're staying, it's 40 degrees in the garage. It's stinking cold. Here she was exercising, lifting weights, doing just super peppy workout in the garage. She does kickboxing, aerobics, yoga, all these things in the 40-degree garage, in the winter. So it can be done. We can do this. We might have to bust out some old school exercise videos, or nowadays, I guess it would be online stuff. But we might have to bust out that stuff and get active, because it's super helpful. Being active, maintaining a healthy weight, super important with immune function. Obviously, don't do things to your health that's going to make you more sick, like don't smoke. Please don't smoke. And if you do drink, please drink in moderation. I hate to belabor this, but man, smoking is, holy crap, one of the absolute worst things we can do to ourselves. Absolute worst. It wrecks our blood vessels, causes stroke, heart attacks, just this syndrome X with insulin resistance. Smoking just makes our arteries hard and just friable, clogs them up. It's horrible. It's probably the worst thing we can do to ourselves. And so please stop smoking. You can do it. You can get help. You can do this. There's lots of resources out there, 1-800-QUIT-NOW, and many others. But please do it for yourselves. Do it for your family. Another simple thing is just getting adequate sleep. Our bodies do need, like I mentioned earlier with the exercise, we do need some time to regenerate, rejuvenate. Our cells have to recover. And so, 7 hours, 8 hours a night is awesome. It's something that, it's interesting because the science there, in a lot of ways, we don't really know exactly why we need sleep, but we know that we do, because when you go years and years on end and you don't have good, restful sleep, you start to exhibit, some signs of all kinds of issues. And so sleep is super important. It's something we can simply do. And right now, hey, we're at home anyway. We're not going to be commuting, which for me eats up into my, work day. I spend probably, when I'm heading to work and back, an hour and a half or more on the road commuting. And so, for many years, it was really hard for me to get adequate sleep. And since I have been recently, man, it makes a big difference, I mean, don't be in bed all day, but get your 7, 8 hours of rest, and it's going to be awesome. And then bust out your exercise like we talked about earlier. And the other thing that I love to talk about, but don't have much time in this podcast really, is minimizing stress. Okay. Modern medicine, thank you, finally is recognizing the link between the mind and the body. Okay. And decreasing the stress in our lives, in our minds, in our hearts, emotionally. This actually helps to improve immunity, decreasing that bad stress, okay? It's been proven. There's plenty of data out there. So please do what you can to minimize the stress. And part of that is probably watching a little bit less of the news. I mean, stay informed with what you need to know, but don't stress yourself out. This is not a time for global freak out. This is a time for us to come together, to maximize our own health so we can care for our loved ones, our elderly parents, grandparents, our children, our neighbors, and all of that. And if we're not well ourselves, it's going to be really, really hard for us to care for our community. So please, please, please practice stress reduction. I'm going to have a whole podcast on that. I love that topic. It's just super interesting to me. I've studied it a lot over the years. I just love, love, love it. But enough for now. And just wanted to once again touch a little bit on the nutrition side of things, because gosh, I cannot overemphasize this. So important. And many of us, and especially the elderly, which is another thing that got going against them with this, is they're very deficient in a lot of essential vitamins and trace minerals. This so-called micronutrient deficiency is super common and more common in the elderly than in other age groups. And it's super common in, many parts of the world where they don't have good nutrition. This is shown, scientifically proven, that if you have malnutrition, poor nutrition, undernutrition, because of this, you are definitely more prone to illness. And so please, let's improve that. And primarily this is found, like I said, in clean, whole ingredients that are fresh. I'm not a strict, vegan, but I eat largely a plant-based diet. The overwhelming majority of my diet is all plant-based and natural. I try to avoid too much of, especially processed foods. I try to not eat any processed foods or processed, sugars and too many carbs and things like that. But I'm not a zero carb guy. I mean, I'm normal, but I really do focus on not eating too many, especially not the processed foods, trying to avoid especially processed, vegetable fats and oils, like these things that were made popular 100 years ago when Crisco first came out. Holy crap, is there a lot of chemicals and bad stuff in there. That's a whole nother podcast, and it's super interesting. I can't wait to talk about it, but we need to try to avoid processed foods, try to avoid these processed vegetable, oils and lards and things. And then, I'm all about having a good steak every once in a while. I'll just be honest. I'm being real with you guys. I want to share. I want you guys to know me. And I do love a good filet once in a while. I don't eat it every day. I might eat a filet once a month, once every couple of months, but I love a good filet mignon once in a while. And that's okay. But let's make sure that we're monitoring, that we're just paying attention to these things, because I know at least here in the US, I know we're not. I mean, I got real evidence of it just this last week. As I mentioned, I was just in the stinking grocery store and all the processed stuff was gone and the fresh stuff was mostly untouched. Like, that's a problem. But there's so many good options out there, because we need our vitamin C. We need our vitamin A. We need our vitamin E. And, things like citrus, all kinds. Right now, I bought a whole thing of oranges, a couple things of the small cuties in the store. I bought tons of broccoli, peppers, bell peppers, ginger. All these things have these ingredients in them. They also have anti-inflammatories. If you like spinach, awesome. That also has vitamin C. These are all containing antioxidants, which are amazing, decreasing the free radicals in our body, which overproduction of them in our mitochondria causes big problems. And I can't wait to talk about that on a podcast upcoming. Just super interesting. If we eat more yogurts that have active, cultures, hopefully you're getting the Greek yogurt that's unsweetened, much better. 20 plus years ago, I used to buy that Costco Yoplait, and I won't touch that stuff anymore. Holy crap, it's terrible. Not good for you. You stick to the good Greek yogurts, which a lot of cultures, a lot of probiotics without all the dang sugar. If we could reduce the sugar in our lives, holy crap, people, we would be so much more healthy. Just unbelievable. We should also be eating nuts, lots of nuts. Walnuts are amazing. They actually have the omega-3s, which most people, think about as fish only. And I love fish too. That's why I could never be a strict vegan. I live in Hawaii primarily, and I love my poke. I just love fish. I just couldn't go without it. So fish is awesome. It supports the omega-3s. Also, walnuts do as well. Other things like chia and flaxseed. I'll throw it in there. There are some good things out there in a can, like chicken broth or chicken soup that has some good stuff in there. But that's not necessarily because it's in a can. It's just that's how the easy way it is for us to get it. If you were to, buy chicken and take the bones and all and make a soup out of it, the real bone broth, that you're actually making yourselves, it's got good stuff in there, man. It's got vitamins. It's got vitamin B6, It helps with formation of blood cells, hematopoiesis, we call it. Also, like I said, fish is great. Shellfish is great too, because you guys probably have heard about, taking zinc to help with the common cold. And why not take a little bit more zinc right now? Don't overdo it. I mean, if you get too ridiculous about it, too much of anything, including the good stuff, vitamins and minerals, too much of it can cause problems too. But shellfish has a lot of zinc, if you like crab or clam or lobster or mussels. I mean, it's got a good amount in there, but try not to go over about, I think 11 milligrams is the daily max. So it's a little bit hard to do, but everybody sometimes, including me, I'm kind of like, I get a hold of something, I just want to do, and I might overdo it. So let's not overdo it, but definitely we can increase our immune health tremendously through our diet. And I mentioned briefly Greek yogurt and things like probiotics, and I haven't even touched on gut health, which is at least 1 or 2 or 3 podcasts in and of itself, but super, super important to focus on our gut health. Holy moly, there's so much potential to improve that. I mean, we are in our bodies literally and figuratively outnumbered by the bacteria within us. Our so-called microbiome has 30 trillion or more bacteria. These foreign cells, or the bacteria that are present on our skin, in our gut, our intestinal tract, they outnumber us something like 10 to 1 or more. So it's important that we pay attention, I got kind of geeky and nerdy talking about DNA and RNA, about viruses. Well, just think about the DNA in all these bacteria that can also be used to transcribe and make RNA, which will then be translated into make proteins, and proteins that can affect gene function in our body. They can send signals to our own minds to tell us what to do, what to eat and not eat. And these are foreign dudes. These are our bacteria that live within us. They can actually tell us what to do in really a real way. They outnumber us. And so we got to pay attention to our microbiome, to our gut. Holy moly, people. This is just something we got to pay attention to. I can't wait to talk about it more in a future podcast. But yeah, personally, I love Greek yogurt, and I take probiotics in addition. I mean, I just think it's so important. And, it's just also, with respect to the nutrients, it's pretty hard and almost impossible with the American diet to really get all the nutrients we need. And so in addition to eating clean, eating well, eating fresh, I also take, some vitamin supplements too, because I'm not overdoing it. I pay attention, to what I take, but it's very judicious as well as planned. I have specific things that I'm looking at, and I think that, it's important to supplement when you need to supplement, because most of us aren't perfect, although I do my best to eat well, definitely not perfect. So I like anybody else, I'm paying attention to what I put in my body, because truly, as many have said, including just a good dude out there, he's an internist named Dr. William Lee. I just think he's amazing. The dictum that he likes to support, which I 100% agree with, food is medicine. It absolutely is 100%, way more than we even know and realize. So pay attention to what you put in your body. So important. I just can't even really dig into it too much in this podcast. We're pretty much out of time, but other micronutrients that we need: iron, selenium. We talked about zinc a little bit, riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, vitamin B6, which is pyridoxine, vitamin B12. These are so important. And they're a little hard to get with a strictly vegan diet. That's why I do both. I eat fruits, vegetables. I also eat a little meat, and then I also supplement. I just really think it's super important to be able to nourish ourselves with these both macro and the micronutrients that we need, because it does make a difference. Like I talked about earlier with our immune function, it does make a difference. So at the end of the day, just please, please, please take care of yourselves, take care of your families, abide by the prudent practices of social distancing, pay attention to your hygiene, super important, and please pay attention to what you put into your body. And make sure you're watching those things that you put into your body, because food is medicine. Can't wait to talk about these things more. Just super, super pumped. It's just so important. And so lots of upcoming podcasts, super excited. I hope you guys found value in this. Feel free to share it. Once again, this is not medical advice. Please consult your physician if you have particular questions. By all means, you're welcome to reach out to me, to send me what interests you have, what questions you want answered, and I will do my best. I am a nerd and I love to read. And so I'm just super excited to get a lot more of these podcasts out to you. Reach out to me on Facebook, on social media at Aloha Surf Doc. I'm here via my podcast. Please review it on iTunes, make comments. I'm going to be sharing that stuff every week, some comments from people, and just, share the love, share the message of hope. We as a community can get through this. We will overcome. We will survive. We are going to get through the coronavirus global pandemic. Yes, we are. I have no doubts whatsoever. So please, 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 please be prudent, be kind, be thoughtful, and share the message of peace, happiness, and wellness, because that's my goal here with the modern medicine movement is wellness. Wellness for you, wellness for your kids, your parents, your loved ones, and for the world, because we can do this together. Love you guys, and a big giant aloha.